time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The document was only a few pages long, but the signature at its base shattered a bond that had survived scandal, exile, accusation, and years of bitter silence. King Charles had made his final decision. Prince Harry was to be permanently removed from the line of succession, his constitutional place erased by royal authority. When the palace doors closed behind the king, everyone inside understood the same terrifying truth. This was not punishment. It was a permanent separation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles sat alone in the palace study and read the paragraph twice. The constitutional instrument, a formal document used to alter who could legally inherit the throne, rested beneath his hand. The line of succession was the monarchy's declaration of who belonged inside its future. By removing Harry, the monarch was no longer treating him as an inactive royal who might return. He was cutting him from the dynasty's constitutional path. Silence pressed against the room as the father removed his glasses. His eyes moved toward a framed photograph of the Duke as a laughing child, before duty became resentment. For one moment, the sovereign's pen hovered above the page. Then he signed. No aide entered. No witness offered comfort. The decision belonged to Charles alone. Across California, Harry opened a secure message expecting terms for another private conversation. Instead, the younger son found the sentence confirming that his removal was complete and permanent. His face tightened. Meghan saw the change before he lowered the phone and whispered, "He actually did it." She moved closer, but he did not look up. The words had erased one of his official ties to the family that shaped his life. Secrecy protected the order. Senior courtiers surrendered their phones before entering the briefing, while palace communications staff prepared language, allowing no suggestion of reversal. William had already been told. The prince did not oppose the action, yet he demanded that his brother hear it directly from the palace before broadcasters or editors received a line. That demand exposed the conflict tearing through the future king. William had chosen the crown, but he had not stopped feeling the loss of Harry. To the public, the removal would appear sudden. Inside the family, it followed a hidden incident that destroyed the monarch's remaining trust and forced one brother to decide whether blood could be protected when duty itself felt threatened. Yet the signature was only the visible wound, because behind it stood a father, two estranged sons, and a private betrayal none of them could ever take back. Long before the constitutional language, the sealed folders, and the carefully measured palace statement, this crisis belonged to three men, bound by blood and divided by duty. Charles was not merely removing a name from an official order. He was judging his younger son. William was not merely supporting a sovereign. He was accepting the permanent loss of his brother. And Harry was about to discover that distance had finally become exile. The king had spent years trying to divide his heart from his duty, but the separation had finally become impossible. As a father, he remembered the wounded child behind the anger. As sovereign, he carried responsibility for an institution that could not survive endless uncertainty: the crown. The monarchy, as a continuing institution rather than one individual ruler, demanded stability, and protecting it now meant acting against his own son. That knowledge followed him into every room. William felt the same pressure from another direction. Standing closest to the throne, the prince knew that Harry's uncertain position did not affect him alone. It reached Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis, because the future king believed every unresolved conflict created another weakness around the family expected to carry the monarchy forward. He feared that silence would not preserve peace. It would simply delay the next explosion. Harry understood the decision differently. His place in the line of succession, the official order deciding who could inherit the throne, had become one of his final links to the world of his birth. Losing it told him the palace had not merely rejected his choices. It had imagined a future in which he no longer belonged. He could endure criticism, but this felt colder. This felt like being removed from the family's memory before he had even left it. William stood alone before the next briefing and turned an old photograph face down on his desk. The image showed him beside his brother during a military engagement, both smiling without caution. He rested his hand on the frame, then pulled it away. Supporting the order might protect his children, but it would also bury any easy path back to the man who had once understood him best. Camilla saw the cost settling over Charles during a private breakfast. The queen consort asked whether he had slept, but he avoided her eyes and folded a newspaper that had not yet printed the story. She watched his hands tighten against the paper and understood that he viewed the decision as a failure, even if the monarchy called it necessary. When she asked again, the monarch answered only, "There was no safe choice left." Catherine had already warned William during a private conversation that history would separate protection from revenge. She told him anger could not become constitutional judgment, and her words forced the heir to question whether he was defending the crown, answering years of pain. Yet one private encounter had changed everything. After that night, Charles stopped asking whether reconciliation could still happen, and began asking how another breach could be prevented. To understand why a father crossed this irreversible line, the story must return to the private meeting that transformed suspicion into certainty. Every royal rupture has a moment that later becomes impossible to ignore. The conversation after which every silence means something different. For Charles, that moment came during a private meeting at Clarence House, arranged without cameras, advisors, or public conditions. Harry had requested one final opportunity to speak as a son rather than a public adversary. But before the night was over, a confidential royal matter would be repeated beyond the palace walls. Charles agreed to the meeting because part of him still believed blood could reach where official messages had failed. Clarence House, his London residence, offered privacy away from the larger machinery of Buckingham Palace. No formal minutes were taken. No aides sat nearby. The king and his younger son entered with one clear promise. Nothing said in that room would be repeated to lawyers, publishers, broadcasters, or outside advisors. For the monarch, that promise mattered because he was preparing to discuss the continuity of royal authority. The arrangements, ensuring the crown could continue functioning if illness or pressure reduced his workload. Harry listened as his father spoke about William's growing responsibilities and temporary plans connected to the sovereign's health. The information was not gossip. It concerned who would carry essential duties, how decisions would be approved, and how stability would be protected during a vulnerable period. Charles trusted him with those details because he wanted the Duke to understand that the family's changing structure was driven by necessity, not a secret campaign to erase him. The tension softened when the father pushed the briefing papers aside. Charles admitted that he missed speaking to Harry without lawyers, publishers, or aides turning every sentence into a weapon. The younger man's anger briefly faded. He confessed that he missed knowing whether his father's words belonged to the parent or the crown. For several painful minutes, they spoke honestly, and reconciliation seemed close enough to touch. Then Harry mentioned William. He accused his brother and palace officials of deliberately pushing him out while pretending duty left them no choice. Charles rejected the charge. He warned that his son could not demand trust while treating every disagreement as proof of conspiracy. The Duke rose suddenly, his chair striking the floor behind him, and asked whether the meeting had ever been about healing or simply testing his obedience. 48 hours later, the fragile trust collapsed. A foreign media host described the exact confidential contingency arrangement discussed inside Clarence House, using language almost identical to the king's explanation. Only Charles, Harry, and 2 constitutional advisors, specialists who guide the monarchy on its legal powers, had known the details. Charles called his son privately and asked whether he had repeated the information. Harry denied authorizing any disclosure, yet refused to identify whom he had spoken to afterward. The monarch waited, hoping for one honest name. None came. He ended the recorded call with words that would haunt them both. "I trusted you with the crown. not merely with my feelings. That conversation became the point of no return. Charles ordered a confidential review of Harry's constitutional position, while William received a summons to face the brother he could no longer protect from consequence. What began as a leaked confidence would now become a confrontation, and this time Charles would force his sons to speak without cameras, spokespeople, or escape routes. The room had been cleared before Harry arrived. No private secretaries, no communications advisors, no lawyers waiting behind adjoining doors, only Charles, William, and the younger son whose future they had gathered to decide. For several seconds, nobody sat down. The brothers looked at each other across the table, as if measuring the years between them, while their father remained standing beside the empty chair that once symbolized Harry's place inside the family. Charles broke the silence first. He told both sons that this meeting was not about money, titles, security, or another carefully managed public appearance. It concerned Harry's constitutional position, his official place within the legal structure of the monarchy, and whether that position could survive. After confidential information had escaped the family, the king spoke calmly, but his restraint made the warning feel heavier. One careless breach had now become a threat to trust, continuity, and the crown's ability to prepare for moments of crisis. William leaned forward and made the danger plain. Harry's distance from royal duties was no longer the central problem. His continued access to sensitive family matters was. The prince argued that uncertainty could weaken public confidence because nobody knew which way. Private conversation might later become part of another interview, book, or media storm. He said the monarchy could survive disagreement, but it could not build its future around unpredictable disclosure. Harry turned on his brother. He accused William of waiting years for an excuse to erase him, and said the palace had confused control with protection. The Duke insisted that the removal was not designed to save the crown. It was designed to ensure only one brother's account of their family would remain credible. He asked whether the future king wanted stability or simply silence. William rose before Charles could interrupt. He said he had defended Harry privately long after trust began breaking, even when doing so created tension inside his own home. His voice tightened, then cracked. You kept asking us to prove you belonged, while giving us reasons to fear what belonging allowed you to know. The words stopped the room. Harry stared at him, wounded not by royal language, but by the brother hidden beneath it. Charles opened a dark folder and placed an unsigned removal instrument between them. The instrument was a formal document designed to begin the legal process of ending Harry's place in the succession. The younger son saw his name printed beneath the final clause and asked whether the decision had already been made. His father answered that the last choice depended on what happened next. The king offered one final route. Harry would sign a binding private undertaking, a written promise carrying formal consequences, identify everyone who received details from the Clarence House meeting, and permanently end paid disclosures about internal royal affairs. The Duke refused. He said those conditions would not restore trust. They would purchase his silence and force him to surrender the right to describe his own life. Charles slowly set down his pen. He told Harry that a voice could not carry constitutional privilege without constitutional responsibility. The younger son pushed back his chair and walked out before the meeting formally ended. William remained behind, staring at the empty seat his brother had abandoned, while the monarch closed the unsigned folder. But even after the door closed, one question remained. Did Charles truly possess the power to make that family rejection permanent? Royal decisions are often announced in a single polished sentence, but the power behind them moves through locked offices, coded memoranda, and conversations the public never hears. Charles could declare his will as a father, yet removing Harry from the succession required something far larger than personal anger. The crown needed constitutional certainty, political cooperation, and language strong enough to survive every future challenge. That machinery was already moving before Harry left the palace. Charles knew a palace statement alone would never be enough. It could be dismissed as symbolic, reversed by a future sovereign. or weakened by political dispute. The king therefore activated a coordinated royal and parliamentary mechanism, a process linking the monarch's decision with the legal authority needed to change the official order of inheritance. Senior constitutional officials began preparing the succession arrangements, the formal rules deciding who could inherit the throne, so the removal would be recognized across every realm connected to the crown. The pressure deepened during a late-night briefing. A senior advisor placed two versions of the instrument before Charles. One imposed a temporary suspension, the other made Harry's removal permanent. The monarch touched the temporary version first, his fingers resting against the opening paragraph, but he slowly pushed it away without finishing the page. A temporary answer, he understood, would only preserve the uncertainty that had brought the family to this point. William entered after the officials withdrew. Charles told his elder son that supporting the permanent order meant inheriting more than a protected throne. The prince would also inherit the anger, grief, and judgment that followed it. He asked whether his father would regret choosing the crown over Harry. The king did not hesitate. Every day, but regret does not make the danger disappear. Knowing the decision would strengthen his future, while damaging something he could never replace. Resistance remained inside the palace. One experienced courtier warned that removing Harry could transform him into a lasting symbol of royal rejection, giving every future criticism greater emotional power. Another argued that leaving the Duke inside the succession would allow each disclosure to carry the shadow of constitutional legitimacy. Charles listened to both men because the choice was not between pain and peace. It was between two different forms of danger. The decisive clause ended the debate. It stated that Harry could not be restored by a private royal wish, a family reunion, or a quiet order from a future monarch. Any return would require an entirely new constitutional process, meaning political approval and formal legal action would have to begin again. William read the provision twice. He understood that even when he became sovereign, he could not simply reverse what his father had done. Charles gave the final authorization. Palace staff immediately began a timed notification sequence designed to reach Harry before broadcasters, editors, or foreign governments received confirmation. Across the Atlantic, the secure message arrived. The younger son opened the completed text and discovered that the consequences did not stop with him. His children's relationship to the monarchy's future had also changed. The crown had secured its authority, but across the Atlantic, the human cost of that authority was about to enter Harry's home. Harry had survived hostile headlines, lost patronages, family silence, and the removal of royal protection. Yet the document in his hands felt different, because it did not describe a temporary consequence. It described a future in which the monarchy would move forward without his name. As he read the final clause, his anger gave way to something quieter and more dangerous. The realization that his children might one day ask why their grandfather had erased their father. Harry received the complete instrument only minutes before the palace announcement was due to appear. The formal notification confirmed that his position had been removed permanently and that every official succession record would be changed. Succession materials were the documents showing who could legally inherit the throne, while constitutional briefings guided officials through what would happen during a royal emergency. His name would vanish from both. The removal was not ceremonial. It changed how the monarchy planned its future. The consequences spread across every part of his former life. Palace planning documents would no longer include him. Ceremonial contingency arrangements, the emergency plans, deciding who could perform royal duties during a crisis, would be rewritten without his name. Invitations tied directly to his former constitutional position would be cancelled or redirected. Harry understood that the palace was not merely closing a door behind him. It was rebuilding the corridor as though he had never stood there. Harry gripped the kitchen counter until his knuckles whitened. He reached the clause concerning descendants through his line, folded the pages sharply, and walked outside without speaking. Meghan followed after several moments, but stopped when she saw that he needed distance. The Duke remained alone, staring at nothing, while the words about Archie and Lilibet repeated in his mind. Meghan finally told him the decision proved the institution had never intended to welcome them back. She expected anger, but Harry answered with grief. He said this was no longer about returning to royal duty. Their children would inherit the consequences of a conflict they had not created. Archie might one day ask why his birth had once connected him to the crown, only for that connection to be weakened by choices made before he could understand them. Lilibet would carry a royal name into a future that had formally excluded her father. The phone rang before either could say more. Princess Anne spoke directly and did not challenge Charles's decision. She warned Harry not to answer while wounded, because one reckless statement could turn permanent separation into permanent war. But this time her voice changed. She reminded her nephew that anger released publicly could never be gathered back privately. Harry ignored the warning at first. He drafted a declaration accusing the palace of weaponizing birth and punishing children for adult disagreements. Meghan read it twice and remained silent. Before releasing it, the Duke sent the words to a trusted friend through a private message. The response contained one question: "Do you want to be heard, or do you want to hurt them?" Harry stared at the screen, then deleted the statement. He asked instead for one conversation with William, not as an heir speaking to an excluded prince, but as two brothers who might never speak honestly again. With the public statement still unreleased, the crisis narrowed to one private call, in which two brothers would decide whether anything human could survive the constitutional break. There were no aides listening, no palace notes being taken, and no carefully approved language to protect either man. William answered after midnight in Britain, knowing Harry was calling from a house where the removal order had already changed the atmosphere. For the first time in years, neither brother began with an accusation. Harry asked one question: "When you supported this, did you stop thinking of me as your brother?" William's answer altered everything that followed. William had stepped away from his security team after seeing an old personal number appear on his phone. The prince refused the suggestion that a private secretary remain close, because this conversation could not survive another official witness. Harry had used a number almost abandoned after their relationship collapsed, one that belonged to a time when brotherhood came before statements, lawyers, and competing versions of the truth. The silence between them carried years of damage. Harry did not ask about the constitutional process, and William did not defend the removal order. Instead, they spoke about Diana, their childhood, and the strange burden of being raised as the heir and the spare. The heir was the child expected to inherit the throne, while the spare was the younger sibling once viewed as protection for the royal line. Both men admitted that those roles had shaped them before either was old enough to understand the cost. William finally answered the question. He said he had never stopped thinking of Harry as his brother, but he had stopped believing brotherhood could excuse every breach. The future king admitted supporting the removal, then revealed through that unrecorded private call that watching the Duke leave their confrontation had felt like losing their mother again. One departure had been forced by death. The other had happened while both brothers were still alive. Harry's voice changed. He admitted discussing parts of the Clarence House meeting with someone outside the family, although he insisted he had never expected the details to reach a broadcaster. The younger son confessed that his need to prove how the palace had treated him had blinded him to the trust Charles had placed in him. For the first time, he did not defend the result. He accepted his part in creating it. William now possessed the confession their father had demanded. Harry waited through several brutal seconds, unsure whether the prince would carry those words back to the palace, use them to justify the decision publicly, or offer them as a last attempt to soften the king. The power between them had shifted. One brother held the truth. The other could only wait. William refused to turn the admission into another weapon. He said it had come too late to reverse the order, but the conversation would remain private. The elder brother asked Harry to tell Charles himself one day, not to regain his succession rights, but to end the lie standing between a father and his son. The Duke quietly agreed, knowing honesty could no longer restore his position, only preserve what remained of his dignity. Harry abandoned the furious declaration he had prepared. He drafted a brief response acknowledging the decision, without attacking the monarch, the palace, or William. The silence around everything he left unsaid would now carry more force than another battle. By morning, the private war had quieted, but beyond the palace walls, the announcement was erupting across screens, streets, and front pages around the world. At precisely 9 o'clock, the palace statement appeared. Within seconds, phones lit up across Britain, broadcasters abandoned scheduled programming, and newspaper editors tore apart front pages already prepared for the morning. The language was calm, almost cold, but its meaning was explosive. Harry no longer occupied any place in the succession. The royal family had survived abdications, divorces, interviews, and exile. Now the country was witnessing something even more brutal, a bloodline formally closing ranks. The palace controlled every word. Its statement avoided accusation, betrayal, or family pain, and focused instead on constitutional stability. The relevant instruments, the formal documents giving legal force to the decision, had been completed. Succession records would be updated immediately, and the removal carried permanent effect. That language mattered because it denied both supporters and critics any hope that this was temporary theater. The Crown was telling the world that Harry's separation had moved beyond emotion and entered the official structure of the monarchy. The media divided almost instantly. Some commentators called the decision overdue protection for an institution repeatedly damaged by disclosure and uncertainty. Others described it as a stunning act of family rejection, warning that the Duke might become more powerful outside the palace than he had ever been within it. Every debate returned to the same painful contrast. The monarchy had gained clarity, but a father had formally excluded his son. Charles stood before a muted television at Buckingham Palace as broadcasters displayed photographs of Harry at different ages. The king watched his younger child change from smiling boy to wounded adult across the screen. Camilla entered, saw his expression, and quietly switched it off. The queen consort remained beside him, but he offered no explanation. He did not ask her to restore the sound or turn the coverage back on. The silence said enough. The prince arrived at a scheduled engagement when a journalist shouted, "Did you betray your brother?" His jaw tightened, yet he continued forward without answering. Moments later, a young veteran mentioned serving alongside Harry and spoke warmly of his courage. The future king paused, thanked the man, and said his brother's service would always deserve respect. The response did not defend the removal, but it proved the bond had not been erased as cleanly as the record suggested. Outside Buckingham Palace, the division became impossible to ignore. One person held a sign reading, "Duty has a price," while another placed a childhood photograph of William and Harry against the railings. Cameras captured both together, loyalty to the crown, beside grief for the brothers it had divided. That single moment traveled across networks and social platforms, turning the family's pain into a national argument. A fictional newspaper delivered the defining front page. Beneath an image of an empty ceremonial chair, the headline declared, "The Prince Who Vanished from the Future." The phrase dominated global coverage because it captured what legal language could not. Harry had not vanished from history, memory, or public influence. He had vanished only from the monarchy's official tomorrow. Hours later, Harry released his response through a written public statement. He accepted the constitutional reality, expressed lasting love for Britain, and refused to attack Charles or William. His restraint stunned those expecting fury. By saying less, The Duke forced everyone to hear the pain beneath the silence. When the shouting finally softened, the meaning of Harry's silence became clear, and the monarchy was forced to confront what it had protected and what it had sacrificed. By the end of the day, the constitutional question had been settled beyond dispute. Harry was outside the succession, William remained the unchallenged heir, and Charles had secured the future he believed the crown required. Yet victory did not enter the palace like celebration. It arrived as silence. A father had protected the monarchy by closing the door on his son, while two brothers finally spoke honestly only after the institution between them had made reconciliation powerless. The new order moved quickly from decision to reality. Officials amended the royal records, rewrote succession briefings, and reorganized future planning around William and his children. Those briefings, the formal instructions explaining who would inherit authority during a royal transition, no longer contained Harry's name. His removal was no longer a warning, proposal, or bargaining position. It had become an established constitutional fact that neither private regret nor changing public sympathy could erase. Clarity strengthened the institution, but it came at a brutal price. The palace no longer needed contingency plans built around an estranged royal whose loyalty remained uncertain. William could prepare for kingship without wondering whether his brother's formal position might create another crisis. Yet the future king understood that a clearer path did not mean an easier conscience. The crown had removed uncertainty from its structure, while placing permanent grief inside the family carrying it. Charles returned late that evening to the room where he had signed the instrument. The king lifted the childhood photograph he had avoided earlier, and studied Harry's younger face in silence. He did not destroy it. Instead, the father opened a private drawer and placed the image carefully inside. That gesture carried the truth no palace statement could admit. The monarch had removed his son from the succession, but he had not removed him from memory. Across the Atlantic, Harry read his restrained public statement one final time before placing the removal document out of sight. Meghan watched him close the folder and asked what came next. The Duke told her he would no longer measure his worth by whether the palace welcomed or rejected him. She took his hand as he admitted that the grief would remain. But the fight to recover his former position was over. For the first time, exile no longer felt like a temporary condition. It felt like a life he had chosen to own. William faced a different inheritance. The prince now carried an undisputed path to the throne, but he also carried responsibility for preventing George, Charlotte, and Louis from becoming trapped by the same hierarchy, secrecy, and resentment that had destroyed his bond with Harry. The future king understood that protecting the monarchy required more than removing danger. It required ensuring that duty did not turn the next generation into rivals before they had learned to remain siblings. Charles had preserved constitutional certainty, but his decision exposed the monarchy's harshest truth. When continuity appears threatened, the crown will sacrifice even its closest personal bonds. Harry lost his official place because broken trust became more powerful than blood. The institution emerged stronger in structure, yet permanently marked by the absence of one of its own. No one truly won. Charles remained king, William remained heir, and Harry became independent of the destiny assigned to him at birth. Each man simply accepted the life left behind after the final door closed. And so the matter ended. Not with reconciliation or triumph, but with a final, irreversible exchange. The crown kept its future, while Harry walked away with ownership of his own. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.